I think just kind of trying to hygienic zone it more. So, you have your receiving pits, your dirty side there where they're getting your ingredients in, trying to limit, movement of workers between, the dirty zone and where your finished feed's at. If you do, try to put on some boots or something, PPE, different equipment between the two sides there as well can go a big way. If you, all that dust is, a major vector for salmonella. So trying to control that, not having that dusty broom from that side going over to your clean side, that can go a long way and help prevent that.
Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show. Today I'm here with Tim Boltz. Welcome.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. It sounds like you've got some neat topics for our listeners, but first I would like to hear how you got into chickens.
So I guess my journey in poultry started growing up. We had backyard birds, chickens, some ducks, some geese. I've always just kind of liked the birds, went through college. I got a degree or my bachelor's in animal science, general animal science. From there, I thought nutrition was interesting. So just kind of pursued that, ended up with Dr. Boltz out in West Virginia University. Just kind of went through there, pursued that poultry nutrition aspect as well as the feed manufacturer. Just kind of fell in love with that. And here I am now, making it, hopefully.
Just making it. Can you tell us a little bit more about where the Here I Am Now is? What was your path to your current position?
So up until May of 2022, I was a graduate student. I did both my master's and PhD with Dr. Boltz in West Virginia. After that, I got a faculty position as an assistant professor down here at Mississippi State University. I've been here since May of 2022, starting to get my lab up and running, getting that all going and getting situated.
Awesome. I'm looking outside at your scenery, and it looks a lot warmer than it is here in Iowa, so I'm a little jealous.
60 today, at least. It was kind of cold the last couple of days, but not cold, not super cold.
I see your theme of your graduate studies and your employment is in warmer states, so good good for you.
West Virginia was a little colder, but yeah,
it's
better like Wyoming, Colorado.
Oh gosh, yeah. So what are some of the things that you're currently doing within your new lab? Those are always interesting questions. It takes a little while to get started.
Yeah, so I've been working, I've been here about a year and a half, I guess. Started doing some studies, some general, bird performance studies, feed additives, everything like that, kind of getting that off and going. It's something simple. I've been trying to continue on with kind of the feed hygiene aspect. I've done a little bit of lab-based stuff, looking at the thermal inactivation of E. coli in feed. We kind of use a water bath method. And then I also got some funding here and as well. And then hopefully soon I got a lab scale pellet mill coming in. So that will go and kind of advance that as well. We can mimic more of an actual feed mill in there and smaller scale, a little bit easier to clean. We could use those BSL2 pathogens and everything like that and make it more applicable, I guess.
One of AB Vista's core strategies is to give customers the flexibility to do more with less, which is a common theme among many companies and producers in today's industry. As a science-driven company, AB Vista has proven results to help our customers achieve optimal performance using customized programs with our core phytase and xylanase.
Can you tell us, some of the listeners may be really acquainted with feed hygiene and the importance in the poultry industry, but for those that might not be, can you just give a little background and why this area of research is important?
So I guess it kind of goes back about, I think 2011 is when they started thinking about this, Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, trying to produce safer food. The thought there as well is, if we produce safe feed for these animals, they're in turn going to produce, safer food for us, less salmonella, Campylobacter, everything like that. So that's kind of the thought there is how do we make a pasteurized product, or pasteurized feed or like that before we give it to the bird, and the thoughts of that helps prevent salmonella from colonizing them or another pathogen that then could end up in the processing plant, end up contaminating other carcasses, for the processed products, everything like that eventually end up for us. And then we get sick and, 2 bucket disease and not fun times.
Yeah. So within the aspect of grain processing, do you know if there's an estimate as to what percentage of grain coming into a mill might be contaminated and what the most frequent pathogen would be?
So I've heard a lot of varying takes on it. I've heard some people say that, that they go and they test a lot of different loads out there, of corn, soybean meal, bulk ingredients like that. They can never really find salmonella or E. coli. I think salmonella is more the main one that we think of in feed. There could be the E. coli's and everything like that, but salmonella is kind of what I think of. Then there's other people, you go and you get, it's not a very high prevalence, maybe 20% or something, but it's still they're still finding it. So it's a really, you figure it's there, but it's hard to find sometimes. It's just, you got to, I guess, be in the right spot at the right time to kind of get it. There's some other aspects that play into that. If you're trying to keep your meal a little bit cleaner, you maybe, focusing more on, kind of hygienic zoning and stuff like that. Maybe you reduce the likelihood of it going from, the dirty side to the clean side. If there is anything that is on, those raw ingredients, bulk ingredients we're getting in.
Yeah. So there could be an issue with ingredients, but do you think there is also an issue with, let's say, flies or, other insects that might be in a mill just because mills are, somewhat open and insects can be around easily? Yeah.
So, I think that, insects, flies, beetles, anything like that, if there's rodents as well, wild birds, I think they all could be vectors, they come in there, they defecate or whatnot, they bring in, they're coming from you don't know where, they could be touching stuff, bringing that in there. It's important to try to control for those insects, bugs, or rodents, birds, everything like that. But it's kind of hard, because you can't get every single rat, every single fly, every single sparrow. But trying to bait them and putting fly traps out and trying to lock it up, button it up as tight as you can. I think that goes a long way in trying to prevent those pests from coming in.
Yeah. So what's the impact of the different processing methods on the incidence of some of these foodborne pathogens? Like, would you say because mash doesn't go through the same heating process as a pellet, it's more prevalent, or do some of these pathogens still persist after they go through some of those more intensive conditioning and pelleting processes?
So I've never really looked much into the mash, like, a commercial layer diet type of that, prevalence of that in there, but you figure that, it's not getting any of that thermal processing. So maybe it's not knocking down any pathogens that could possibly in there. In my grad work, we did some stuff there looking at, 80C, 70C, looking at the comparison of those, the reduction of, we used a surrogate organism in there. We saw that those higher temperatures, longer conditioning times did knock it down compared to, 70C for 15 seconds. It's kind of, that's something that's interesting to think about,
Yeah.
Is it more prevalent maybe in laying hens because they're not getting processed feed? It's just that mash feed versus, a broiler that maybe, they're getting that pelleted feed. I think another thing too is trying to control for recontamination, with the pellets. If you say you pellet them and it gets rid of everything, you're getting a sterile pellet, a pellet like that. But then goes on, it's brought to the feed mill, it's cooled, and then it's usually sent, augered around, put into a bin, put into a truck, shipped out to a farm, again, another bin, and then usually a feed line. There's possible recontamination right in there. So you could be making at the feed mill, when that pellet comes out of the pellet dye, it could be, pasteurized, but then once it gets to the farm, it could be recontaminated from the various steps after that. So that's another concern there, or not a concern, but a thought of like, hey, how we handle that? Do we add a product in there that might help prevent that? Or do we just focus more on making sure our augers are clean, our cooler decks cleaned off well? It's kind of a hard thing to think of, but going along. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah, too many. So from a research perspective, you mentioned surrogate and then using like an actual BSL-2 pathogen. What's your opinion on the best method of approach just for repeatable experiments that end up having an impact in the wild, in the industry?
So I think the best thing to do is, if you're going into actual like a feed mill environment, you want to use a surrogate organism. That's going to be an organism that's not going to, if it gets in the feed, it's not going to cause any illness in the animals or people working with it, really. If it persists in the feed mill, you don't want that, the lines, but if it is, it's not really going to cause any issues. And we did some work with that, looking at some E. coli strains, and we had a surrogate we were going to try to use. We found it's actually not very thermal stable. So, that doesn't make it a good surrogate, because the whole thought there is you want a surrogate that's, be more thermostable than your pathogen of interest. So if you knock it down with a high temperature, you're definitely going to be getting your E. coli, your salmonella, your Campy, whatever it may be. So there's, kind of that work there, thinking about that, trying to go there, find a good surrogate, then go to the feed mill and apply it. Repeatability, I think it'd be pretty. I mean, as long as you're starting with similar concentrations each time, an 8 log concentration or a 7 log, whatever you start with, try to keep it consistent. And then the feed mill, there's a lot of other variables there. Ambient conditions, temperatures, humidities, everything like that can affect it. So trying to pellet, if you're doing repeated measures on that, try to always go on a warm, sunny day if that's how you started, and then there's a lot of factors though that, you can't control the weather. So sometimes it's hard to do, but
yeah, that's more factors never helps repeatability, right? But it's real world.
Yeah. I mean, cause the feed mill runs, most days of the week. So if it's rainy and crappy out, it's still running. If it's sunny, if it's windy, cold, it's still running no matter what. Yeah.
So what have been some of the highlights or even challenges for the first year and a half at your position? What's it like to be you and starting up a new lab in the real world?
It's a lot of stuff you don't think about when you're in grad school, trying to find funding, budgeting, everything like that, trying to, plan a study. A lot of times in grad school, we planned some of our studies, but we had, our major professors kind of looking over us, checking that out. Here, you're kind of on your own. Have an idea, you send it off, company, whatnot, you talk it through. It's a lot of stuff you don't think about. Just getting that, funding, getting everything up and running, finding students. It's kind of the hard part. I mean, it's not really hard, but it's the more challenging part I've experienced so far. What else? I guess one of the better parts is, the students. I'm not that much older than a lot of students, so I still kind of feel like I relate to them a little bit. It's fun to go in there. You see them, they learn stuff. They seem to enjoy. I try to be a little bit, interactive with teaching. They seem to enjoy that. They seem to be taking that away and understand, hey, some basic poultry nutrition. They're coming out of the class knowing more than they did when they started. So I guess that's cool, for them doing that. And then got a couple grad students now, and seeing them go out there and start to do some research and see them kind of having those light bulb moments. Oh, hey, this is why we do this. Everything like that. That's I guess rewarding and cool to see. Is the next generation coming up and getting up and going and coming into the industry, academia.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some of the, I guess, focus areas? You kind of alluded to some of your very first projects that you've started since you joined. But what are some of your focus areas now, and what are some of your goal, if money was no option, where do you want to go with your research career if you weren't constrained?
I think the feed hygiene stuff is really, that work is really interesting. I got that pellet mill here, so that will open up a lot more doors because, we can actually, it's small enough, we can get in there, clean it out really well, so you can disinfect it, and then you can go in there, actually use real salmonella strains that you could, you've found actually out in the field, in a feed mill there, looking at different E. coli strains, because it's not super necessarily applicable to poultry, but there's the apex that could possibly be coming in through feed, get birds sick. 0157, thinking about ruminant diets, those pelleted diets, possibly trying to reduce that. I think the feed hygiene. We're also here at Mississippi State. We're trying to get a feed mill up and going as well. It wouldn't be BSL2, but still just having that that nice little feed mill there to work in and kind of continue. I did a lot of throughput work, production rate work in grad school, so that was really cool. Just pellet quality, seeing how that affects birds. Using different ingredient inclusions, alternative ingredients. If you pellet those, does it make the pellet better, make it worse? That's always kind of an interesting thing. Thermostability of enzymes as well. So the feed hygiene, I guess, would be my major area. If I had unlimited funding gifted to me, do what I want, I'd really like to focus on that. Make a nice little lab. You'll be able to run actual pathogens through that little pellet mill. Maybe some point later on, you'll find a more of a pilot scale type BSL2 feed mill, see if they get the similar results there, compared to our small mill. What else? And then I guess, I think too, just a general nutrition, applied nutrition. Hey, you have an enzyme, you want to, you have a new enzyme you're trying to put on the market, see how that affects bird performance, pellet it, feed the bird, see how that does. I think that's kind of interesting stuff as well, different products like that. I did a lot of enzyme type works. I know there's a lot more of the phytogenics type out there now, essential oils. I think that would be kind of interesting too to get into and see how those work.
Yeah. So what do you think about how like the industry is receiving some of this information. Do you think feed hygiene has enough of an emphasis, or do you think it's going to become even more popular, especially since we're 12 years past some of maybe the FSMA changes? But I guess, is there enough emphasis on it right now, or is it something that we really should pay more attention to at the industry level?
I think it's pretty good right now. I've talked to some people, commercial nutritionists out there, and they're talking. They're like, hey, this is like your life now. Is thinking about those FSMAs. If the big plants have HACCP plans, everything like that. Just thinking that through, like how do we keep our workers safe? A lot of times I think that's kind of the thought there is how do we keep our workers safe? And then once we produce that feed, a big integrated operation, they're not really going to be handling it again. It's going to be loaded onto a truck and then shipped to a farm, and so they're just worried about the beforehand as they're making it, because after that the birds are getting there. But I think still trying to think of ways to help it get from recontamination, get to those farms. I think that's kind of the main thing. I think that they're doing pretty good work with that as well. They're thinking about that, trying to do more cleaning. So I think there's pretty good emphasis on it now, but that might change more. Legislation, everything like that could always increase or decrease its importance a little bit, and probably not decrease, but increase the importance.
So what are some of the major pieces of legislation that need to be paid attention to? Is there anything changing in certain parts of the United States that would alter what someone is doing elsewhere? I mean, because some of these companies have mills in several locations, and it could affect overall operations, right?
I'm not super up to date on that. I know the FSMA, that's kind of like the whole umbrella one that I'm aware of. Everybody's kind of, they have to comply. I think everybody has to be compliant with that. I think it was like 2020 or 2019. So everybody should be doing that by now. Individual state-wise, I don't really know if there's a whole lot of if Mississippi has something versus Iowa versus Michigan, whatever a state, you put a state in there. I'm not sure if there's different legislation in those states that would impact it.
Yeah, well, it's good to know, because sometimes there's additional state rules right on top of whatever federal
you get the individual little state little thing that they want their own little piece of the pie type of thing.
Yeah. So do you think there's any maybe high impact practices you could recommend if you were to go to an operation that's maybe having some trouble with some aspect of feed manufacturing that would, lead to increased contamination? What are the big key takeaways if you want to improve?
I think just kind of trying to hygienic zone it more. So, you have your receiving pits, your dirty side there where they're getting your ingredients in, trying to limit, movement of workers between, the dirty zone and where your finished feed's at. If you do, try to put on some boots or something, PPE, different equipment between the two sides there as well can go a big way. If you all that dust is a major vector for salmonella, so trying to control that, not having that dusty broom from that side going over to your clean side, that can go a long way. I want to help prevent that. More on the conditioning, conditioning times and temperature side of that. I think that really varies. From my understanding, there's not a whole lot of an industry guideline that, hey, you need to pellet it 80C for 30 seconds. It kind of varies mill to mill, operator, integrator. Also, location, because sometimes if you're up north, Minnesota or something, you're not going to be able to, put as much heat and steam into that feed because you get to a certain point where you're going to plug the dye. Whereas down south, we have a little bit more wiggle room, so we can go a little bit hotter. Well, sometimes we have to because it's just so hot and humid here. We have to go really hot just to get some extra moisture into that feed. So I think it kind of just varies. I don't know if there's really, that doesn't answer your question super well, but it varies really, mill to mill, location, everything like that. I think the big thing would be just kind of hygienic zoning. Trying to prevent contamination between clean and dirty. I think that can go a long way.
This is sort of related. I know most of your work is in microbiology, but have you had any interest in projects that are more on the high path avian influenza side? Have there been any indications that anything's being transferred through feed? I know it's usually thought about through aerosolization or ventilation and flocks, but I guess I was curious to know if feed ever is a route if a flock gets infected with flu.
Yeah, it's something I've never really thought of that. You think about, somehow, if there's a wild bird in a feed mill and it has high path and it does something and gets, contaminates that feed with that. It's something I've, it's a thought in the back of my mind, but something I've never really thought about, expanding on, because it would be a good thing to look at. Because I mean, that could be a possible introduction rate or a route as well. We think that, you step in some bird droppings go into a house or aerosolize, but feed could also be another way.
It's scary to think about.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Can't control it.
Gosh, yeah, it's the nightmare that nobody wants. So what have been some fun things that your grad students, so they're working on these projects. Have you had a chance to kind of have your grad students mentor other students with other projects? Like, what are some of the things that you find, since you said you were really into training, what are some of the things that you've been successful with as far as your first couple of years with finding grad students and then kind of moving them on in their studies?
I just kind of lucked into, I found a couple folks that were looking and, they were willing to take a shot on me. So they were here. It's just cool. My first one, he's been here for about a year, a little over a year. He's helped out. We're starting to do some of his projects. He did some E. coli stuff in the lab. So that was cool. He kind of, when he got here, I don't think he had a whole lot of lab experience, cultivating bacteria, anything like that. So it was cool. He kind of, now he's a little bit more proficient in that. He understands, hey, if I want to make this E. coli and salicylic acid resistant, this is what I need to do to get that. And so that was cool because you could trust him. Like, hey, can you go do this? He's like, yeah, and he knows how to do it. So that's cool. I know he's helped a lot of the other groups here. You have Dr. Walmsley, Dr. Adhikari. They're doing nutrition research. He's helped out there. He's learned a lot, I think, with that. That's cool because, talking to him, he's like, oh, hey, we're talking about trying to, what's a good way of sampling or something. He's picked up little tips and tricks that I maybe not have thought of because I haven't worked as much with them. They have more experience. So that's just cool seeing that. What else? My other grad student, she actually started her first trial or her first study here Monday. So it's been a learning experience. She's got birds for 21 days. So, I think she's been a little stressed, but, she's doing good so far. And, she's been working hard, learning, what do you need to do? Hey, I need to go in there. These papers need to be changed because they're on cages right now. They're looking a little gross. I need to go in there, change those. Hey, I need to feed them. So it's cool to see her kind of step up, I guess, and be like, hey, this is my project. I gotta, do this. This is my responsibilities now. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I love watching the grad students develop. So getting a couple of good ones is key when you're early on in your career.
We did some stuff with viscosity, and that was, I did a little bit with that in grad school, but not a lot. And so, I kind of stepped up and they've learned how to use it. They're a lot more proficient with it than I am or ever was. So that was cool too, seeing them. I'm like, hey guys, I know how to turn the machine on, and roughly use it, but they actually were out through there and they actually, did some work with it and got pretty good results. So that was cool to see them kind of be better than I was, step up and learn a new piece of equipment and whatnot. So that was also a really cool experience.
Yeah. So I know that in kind of the big scheme of what you could do in the poultry industry, feed manufacturing and milling is definitely a major part since all our birds eat quite a lot of feed.
Yeah.
But what kind of things from a research perspective could a student get involved with, maybe if they're thinking about this as a career path as an undergrad? I know not every school has a feed technology major, so if you were going to pursue this as a career, what's your best advice for somebody who's kind of interested in the feed manufacture side?
So I think, getting in contact with someone, professors most of the time know someone. A lot of times the big integrators, they have, I think I'll work your summer internship programs, they go out there and there's usually somehow a feed mill component on there, that you could kind of get into, go for a summer, work at a feed mill and actually see, hey, is this something I like? Is this something I want to pursue? Just looking for employment, a lot of times those feed mills, they need to be staffed and it's sometimes hard to keep them staffed. So, your whatever local company, they have a feed mill, close to your home, you're not doing anything for a summer, they could look into that. Hey, I can go work at this feed mill for a summer and get some experience, pelleting feed and everything like that. Get that, and then hey, is this something I want to do as a career? Is this something I want to go back to school for? Find a program like you mentioned, and go more into that, technical science side of that. So I think that would be their best bet, would just be maybe find someone or, go through the internship, apply for a job through an integrator, everything like that, and get started, get their foot in the door.
Yeah, I think the internship idea is great. So if you were going to describe like what an undergraduate might do for an internship or what the focus of the job might be, is it hands-on? Are you helping to handle feed? Are you helping to clean? Are you, watching programs run? Like what are kind of some of the entry level, what is the experience, I guess, you might have if you did an internship as an undergrad?
So I never did that in my undergrad. So, but speaking to people and, talking to students who have done it and, folks like that, I think a lot of times it's, a lot of hands-on. You're gonna be out there, you're gonna be learning everything in the feed mill. You're not gonna just be always, dumping in bag, ingredients into micro bins. You're gonna be doing everything. You're gonna learn about how to control it. You're gonna learn, how everything works, general maintenance of stuff. Hey, something breaks down or whatnot. How do we go back and fix that, get that up and running? I think they'll kind of get a crash course, I guess, in the whole feed mill. They might be sweeping some, they might be, unloading bags, but they also might be watching, seeing how, the manager runs everything and, the programs he's going to be using. Just kind of a crash course, I guess, would be the best explanation for it.
Yeah, well, that sounds awesome. I know we have a nice, a healthy undergrad population, and most of them do an internship at some point, and some of them just aren't sure what the internship looks like, so they kind of get nervous and go towards something that might be more familiar. But we need people to work in feed mills so badly, so
yeah,
it's always great to plug.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A worldwide leader in animal nutrition, Adiceo's portfolio of products includes methionine, the full range of vitamins, enzymes, organic selenium, probiotics, mycotoxin management strategies, and palatability products. With such a diverse offering, Adiceo supports its customers with a broad range of expertise, tools, and services to help them maintain a competitive advantage. Adiceo, fueling predictable profits. To learn more, visit Adiceo at www.adiceo.com. It's time for our famous 3. Natural Biologics is using cutting-edge science to dig deeper into the poultry health challenges you face. By gathering scientific evidence, they identify the most effective combinations of natural ingredients that improve animal health. Visit naturalbiologics.com/poultry to see the newest research in both turkeys and chickens.
So to wrap up the chat today, I'll ask you the 3 questions that we ask all of our guests. The first one is, what is a favorite poultry-related resource?
So I like to use, I have it right here, is the Poultry Nutrition and Feeding book by Dr. Pesty. I like that. I do some microbiology work as well. I do some nutrition work. I like the nutrition a little bit better, I guess, if you had to weigh it out. There's a lot of good information there. Gives you a real good solid basis of, feeding a bird, understanding that nutrition aspect of it. I know there's a couple other microbiology books, in grad school, there's a food microbiology book I reference a lot, kind of the same, basic methods of how we analyze the feed samples. It's similar to how you would do it if you were working in, a plant or something, analyzing, food products. It's just feed. So, that was a good reference as well, a resource as well. Go back on one of my advisors, he wrote a little technical lab handbook for food microbiology. I reference that a lot for cereal dilutions. I'm not the best at cereal dilutions, but he has some nice diagrams in there, old Dr. Shen. So I like to go back to those and kind of get an idea like, hey, am I doing this right? Like I always second guess myself on dilution. So I go back and this makes sense. The book says it's good, so it's got to be good.
I love that. It's easy to second guess yourself, especially when it's really important that you get it right. So I totally get it. What is a favorite non-poultry related resource?
So I like to keep, in my spare time, I keep some reptiles and some invertebrates. There's a couple podcasts I like to do. One of them is Tom's Big Spiders. He just talks about general tarantula stuff, different species highlights in there, different. I try to find the ones, for the species I have, Grammostola pulchri, the golden knees. I just trying to learn, what he does for, how he keeps his animals, what I can do to improve, for mine. There's some YouTube videos out there as well, different channels that talk about reptile husbandry and just general reptile care. And, sometimes those are good to look at and see like, hey, here's a good idea. Oh, hey, I didn't think about, keeping my animal like that, using, this is a certain type of hide or something. I think that's kind of an interesting thing, seeing different people's perspectives and how they view it.
I like hearing about people's hobbies. They are so diverse. So not to get too invasive, but what do you have a tarantula, and what is their name if you do?
So I don't really name them, but I have 9 of them. There are 8 species, 8 different species.
Wow.
9. There's 2 of the one species, but then I have a corn snake, a sand boa, 2 leopard geckos, a gargoyle gecko, crested gecko, and a Pac-Man frog, and a California king snake.
Gosh.
It's a little zoo there.
Yeah, it does sound like a little zoo. I think you got to work on names for those.
Yeah.
Could be like the Avengers or something. I mean, you've got enough for a whole club there, so I could go on a theme. Oh, that's awesome. So the last question is, what is your best advice for somebody to be successful in the poultry industry?
I mean, I think, it's going to take a lot of, long hours, in grad school, here now. It's not just a 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever, 8 to 4, whatever type of job. You're usually working outside of normal hours. You're working some weekends and stuff. There's a lot of hard work you got to put into it, but it rewards you well. I'm not the best at networking. I'm trying to get better at that. I think networking is a big thing, because you find people, and then later on down the road, you're like, oh, hey, I know Joe Schmo here. He can maybe help me get in contact with someone else, or if he needs, help with something, he can reach out to you, get you in contact. So I think, networking is a big thing there as well. Just kind of working hard, putting your nose to the ground, just going at it, I think is also a good, thing to do if you're trying to be successful.
Yeah. Well, I think that is great advice. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was really fun.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.